went to 2.
Okay, I see the live sign. Yeah.
Yes. So we are now live. So what I'm gonna do is go back to the Taylor House Publishing page, and I'm gonna share it to my page. It'll be tagged. It'll be tagged on my page. So I'm gonna tag you in it, and who's ever. Okay. What, you got a dog back there?
You can hear him?
Yeah.
Yeah. I got the door closed, but they're out there playing with him or something.
Yeah, what kind of dog is it?
A Yorkie. He's like a puppy. He only like 6 months old, 6 or 7 months old. Let me close this door.
Okay.
Yeah, y'all keep him down out there, man.
Yeah, and I do want to welcome the Facebook audience. We're already joining in. A couple of people I see y'all. Thank y'all for joining in. The radio show is going to start in about 2 minutes. So it should be already live on your page. What I'm going to do is go ahead and switch the microphone so you won't be able to hear me until the show starts.
Okay.
Winterville, Ayden, Griffin, Southside, Greenville, North Carolina.
I try to be a better man, but folks just don't understand. Trying to do all I can to deal with this addiction in me. Lord, I wanna change. I can't stay the same with the sins that in my veins. It's trying its best just to kill me.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the U-Turn Radio Show. I am your host, Richard Taylor. We're back once again this week here at Awesome Radio. Make sure if you haven't visited our website, www.wbisawesomeradio.org, visit the website. And if you do want to download the app, you can download it through Alexa, Google Play, or the Apple Store. Also, we are on Roku TV. We have a Roku TV channel, so you can check us out there, Awesome Radio. And also, you can check us out on the local station, GPAT TV here in Greenville. Once again, I'll feel free to call in on the show, 252-756-2008. And I am back with part 2. We did a show earlier last month. I have my special guest, Michael J. Brant, and he's an author. He's a administrator, a person who has overcome. The song on the beginning, talks about overcome the addiction. So he's definitely a man with an amazing story, and we're going to talk about a little bit about that. But this just first, I want to say welcome, Mr. Brant. How you doing today?
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to thank God for allowing me to be on the U-Turn show with my man Richard right here. And I'm doing fine, man. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
That's good, man. That's good. And a lot
Yeah.
of people he's from New York, man. I'm from North Carolina, so I always had a respect for the New Yorkers. The New Yorkers used to come down here and show us the way. Almost, it was always cool. And they had the new slang, the fresh clothes. So much respect to my New Yorkers, man. And thank God for allowing us to be here. So we're gonna start off, man. Tell us how it was growing up in New York, man. Like I said, everybody know New York is a tough place, and we hear a lot of stories. How
Right.
was it for you growing up in the Big Apple?
Well, as a kid, New York was a lot of fun, and it's still a lot of fun. But the neighborhood that I lived in, which was Brownsville, in the borough of Brooklyn, uh, presented with a lot of challenges. You know, um, shout out to all the people in Brownsville. There's a lot of hardworking parents, a lot of hardworking people out there in Brownsville that don't really get a lot of credit for being residents in Brownsville, because there's so much going on in Brownsville. From when I was growing up all the way up until now.
Oh,
Brownsville was very challenging in the aspect that, you know, for me as a little kid, there was a lot of negative images, around. Um, as a young child, I grew up in a tenement building on Mother Gasson between Riverdale and Livonia. And, I saw a lot of things as a young kid, maybe from 5 years old. I think I could remember as far back as 5 years old, you know, coming into my building and seeing people in the building with needles in their arms, with rubber bands around their arms, shooting dope. At the time as a kid, I didn't really know what it was. It was during like the Vietnam era, and a lot of our soldiers came back from Vietnam, you know, hooked on drugs. The main drug at that time was heroin, and in order for me and my mother to get in and out of the building, we had to step over what they called back then dope addicts. Today they call them dope fiends or whatever, but I had to step over dope addicts, and I would see them nodding out. I would see the needles in their arm, the rubber band around their arm, and I would ask my mother, I'm like, "Mommy, what are they doing? Who are these people?" And my mother would say, "Oh, those just dope addicts," and rush me in the house. You know,
so
um,
you
yeah,
told me about an
yeah,
incident the first time. I
right.
think when you was 5 years old, or was it 7? Where you was
Exactly. I
actually
was
robbed
5 years
by.
old, and we came home one night from being out, and our apartment was robbed. Little did we know the dope addicts was casing our apartment out every time we came in and out. So
Mm-hmm.
one night we went out and we came back, the apartment was robbed. The things were thrown all over the place. The door was broken in, the window was broken, things were missing. My mother called the cops, and the cops was like, "Oh, I can remember the cops saying, well, they broke the lock. You better hope they don't come back." You
So there
know,
was pretty much no help from the cops.
there was no help from the cops because they had already taken what they wanted and they were gone. But as a kid, that was very traumatic for me because the last thing I heard was that you better hope they don't come back. So trying to sleep in an apartment where it's just been robbed and you thinking the robber's going to come back, that's very traumatic. Like, I don't think I slept that whole night, maybe not that whole week,
Yeah,
for fear of
most
the dope fiends coming back.
yeah. And
You
then there
know,
was an incident. I think you said you got even robbed by some dope fiends. Or
I got robbed by some dope fiends. I, we lived on the second floor, and I used to use a fire escape in the back of the building to go in and out of the building because I didn't want to go through the dope fiends. So I would go out the window down the fire escape to go to the store, which was around the corner. And as I was coming from the store, coming back towards the fire escape, some dope fiends, accosted me and was like, "Yo, give me what you got." This, that, and as a kid, you scared. I just started running.
how old were you then?
I was still 5. I was like 5 years old. And I was still, I ran for my first, and I had my cousin with me. He was maybe 6 years old. So we both started running. He ran up the fire escape first. I ran up behind him. And as I looked back, one of the dope fiends had already threw a table leg. and it was coming flying at me. As I looked back, it hit me in the head, bust my whole eye open, and I almost fell off the fire escape. If it wasn't for my cousin grabbing me, having the right mind to grab me and pull me back in over the fire escape and pull me into the window where my mother was in horror, screaming because my eye was busted open, bleeding profusely, had to call an ambulance, called the police, and, off to the hospital I went. But that was also another trauma.
Childhood trauma. So
at 5 years old, that should never happen to a 5-year-old, especially by some grown men.
Yeah, that was a rough time, man. Like I said, and from what I hear about heroin users, they'll do anything to get that fixed because they need it.
Well, when they need a fix, everybody's in danger.
Everybody's in danger. So moving forward, like growing up, like how was the home life outside of that? Like eventually y'all moved from out of there, right?
Exactly. So we moved right down the street, 2 blocks away into the projects. It's called Brownsville Houses. I lived on Osborne Street and Dumont. 311 Osborne Street and between Dumont and Rockaway. And
was there ever a time when you saw the environment and tried to get into what you saw around you, or what you talk a lot about your mother? Was she like a stabilizing force?
My mother was everything. I didn't have a father, not that I didn't have a father, but my father was not around. As a 5-year-old child, I had never even seen my father. I've heard stories of him, this, that, and the third, but I didn't have a male figure in my home. Right? Okay. It was just my mother. My mother worked in the school. She was an educator, right? Mm-hmm. And education was all she drilled into me. Have respect for your elders, go to school, and you're gonna do chores. Basically, that was my mother.
So define the stereotypes then. So you didn't get in trouble, as a child and a teen.
No, as a child, I did not get it. Not as a young child. I mean, as a young child, as an adolescent, trouble always came to me, right? In the form of bullying. Like I said, I didn't have no brothers. I didn't have no sisters. I lived in a building with the notorious Cato, who was the biggest gang member in New York City at the time. He was the leader of the largest gang in New York City. I saw a lot of things happening in the building, outside of the building, that pertained to the gang life. And then, like I said, I was a kid. I was a quiet kid. They saw me always with my mother. And because my mother worked in the school, that kind of backfired on me because my mother was very strict at home and she was very strict at the school. So I had to deal with a lot of bullying. I used to sell newspapers, on Sundays, and I got robbed, right? I got robbed. Somebody punched me in the mouth. My mother sent me to the store to get something. Somebody punched me in the mouth. Took all my money, took all the groceries, all of that. And so that again was another trauma. So at a certain point in my life, I decided that I'm not going to be a victim no more.
Okay.
You understand? Like I'm tired of being a victim. I'm tired of people bullying me. I'm tired of people hitting on me. I'm tired of people taking things from me. And I had to develop some courage.
So at what point in your life was that? How old would you say that was?
I would say like around 13, 11. Okay. So back in the day, there used to be karate movies. Let me just go there.
Oh yeah,
There's
Bruce Lee
movies, 5 Fingers of Death, all this Into the Dragon, all these different karate movies.
Like the Wu-Tang Clan was into.
I love to go to the karate movies. And one day I asked my mother, I said, you know what? I want to join karate school. And my mother was like, okay, because she was tired of me getting bullied too.
Okay.
She was getting tired of me coming home all busted up, this and the third, So she's like, bet, I'm going to put you in karate school. So I went to karate school probably at the age of 10.
Uh-huh.
By the age of 13, I was a purple belt in karate. Right? And so karate taught me self-defense. and it taught me courage. So now when the bullies came around, they got their ass, excuse my language, they got their butts kicked.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so, you know, but like I said, I was a scared kid, and in order not to become a victim, I started hanging with the victimizers, the people
Okay.
that was victimizing other people. You
So you
know,
started running with the bad guys.
right? I felt safe around them. You
Okay.
know, so we I ran with the bad guys basically. Yeah.
So but yet and still you didn't get in any trouble.
I didn't get it. Well, one
Like
time one time I followed some. I was with these kids, and we went to a another school. I was probably like in the sixth. Matter of fact, I was 12 years old. I went with these kids to another school, and one of the kids robbed another kid for his leather coat. Right? He didn't
mm-hmm.
tell us that he knew the kid. Right? He went and he robbed this kid, and we all ran off with him. Before I know it, the police was at my house. Right? Because he picked the kid knew him. The police picked him up. He told on us. Next, you know, the police came, and we was all down at the precinct at 12 years old. So that was the first time I had any dealings with the law. You know, thank God it went through like the family court system. Nothing really came of it except for the kid who took the code. He had been arrested numerous times before that, and he went like to a group home or something like that. But
Right.
you know, that was my first brush with the law at 12 years old.
So, but eventually though, you escaped the hard and gritty streets of New York, and you eventually end up going to college, right?
I did. And that was because when I was 16 years old, again, running with the crowd, you know, in high school, I went to an all-white high school. They started busing kids from the black neighborhood to the white school, right?
Okay.
So, you know, a lot of the kids from my neighborhood went to the school, and we went out there and we just ran them up. You know, the white kids, they was wearing gold chains, they was driving Cadillacs, they was, you know, they looked like they had a lot of money. So we started robbing them and doing all kinds of stuff to them, and I got arrested again. I had gotten so much trouble in the school, as a matter of fact, that the last thing I did, they called my mother to the school and they said, listen, your son cannot come here no more. You know, mind you, I done got caught smoking weed in the bathroom. I done got caught with 2 or 3 gallons of liquor in my bag. I done got caught with knives. I done got caught robbing people. All of this in the school.
Okay.
Right?
So you
So
was terrorizing.
I was terrorizing, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. Right. And the school had enough of me. They said, listen, you can't go to school here no more. Like, you got to find you another school. So I didn't want to go to another school. And I was really just tired of living how I was living. You know, I'm really not, I really didn't like physically hurting people. You know, I'm not really into that thing. You know, I hate to see people hurting, especially because of something that I did physically to them. So unless they was trying to do something to me, then that's another story. But me just purposely going out and hurting people, that wasn't my thing. So I asked my mother if I could go down south to live with my grandmother so that I could finish high school. And so that's what I did. I went down south, and life was totally different down south. You know, life was slowly, there wasn't pressure to have nice cars. There wasn't pressure to wear jewelry. There wasn't pressure to be with girls. There wasn't pressure to rob people. There wasn't pressure to have this grand image like you getting money. There wasn't none of that. The kids down south, when I got down south, was riding bicycles. They was going fishing. They was playing in the park. They was more into sports. They was,
They were
you know,
being
football.
kids.
They was being kids.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to be a kid. You know what I'm saying? And have all of that pressure. Like, and I thrived. I went to school. You know, everybody in the school liked me, you know, because I was from New York. I had the accent, you know, I had all the clothes, you know, the New York. It was cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had never had so much attention in my life. You know what I'm saying? And so I finished high school, and while I was in school, I applied for college. I applied to South Carolina State. I applied to Benedict College. Uh, the first one that accepted me was Benedict College, and I just went with that. I had never even been to Benedict College. I didn't know what it's about. I just filled out an application.
Where is Benedict? Where is that at?
Benedict is in Columbia, South Carolina. Shout out to the HBCUs out there. Shout out to anybody from Benedict that's listening.
All right. So how was it in Benedict? How was life in Benedict?
Benedict, yo, man, listen, Benedict was another world, man. Like, I was pretty much on my own. My mother came and she helped me register for school. She put a little bit of money down and she broke out and just left me. There was a few kids from Allendale, Fairfax High School that I graduated from that also went to Benedict with me. So I had a couple of homies with me, and at first, because I was on my own, I was just wilding out. I was partying every week, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they had ladies' night, they had this night, that night, all this. I was at the club every night. And I did this for the first year of school, and at the end of the second semester, they was like, yo, listen, you got all 4 Fs and a D. Your average is a 1 point something. If we're going to put you on academic probation. If you don't pull your grade up to over a 2.0, we're going to throw you out.
All right.
I couldn't let my moms down because my moms, it was always instilled in me that I was going to be the first member of our family to go to college and graduate. So that was my goal, but that was also a lot of pressure, because I didn't really know if college was for me. I knew that I was smart and that I could make it, but the thought of being in the military, because that's what all the people in all the guys in Allendale was doing. They was going into the military. They was all talking about being a man and this is what men do. They serve their country and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, okay, maybe that's something I want to do. But my mother was like, no, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to go to college. Like I said to you before, I was more afraid of my mom's than anybody in the street. Okay. So if she said going to college, then that's what I was doing, And so
you straightened up after that academic probation.
I straightened up. I got straight A's. But when I graduated high school, I came back to New York for the summer, right? Instead of me just coming back to New York and just enjoying my vacation and like just doing something positive, I went back to the same old crowd.
Yeah.
That I had left 2 years ago. Right? I went back to the same old crowd. Matter of fact, the dudes that I was hanging with before I left, when I came home, they was on Rikers Island. They was in jail. Both of them was in jail because they had robbed somebody on the train, this, that, and the third, yada, yada, yada. So
hold that thought, Mike. We got to pause real quick for a station break, but we're going to be right back with you. Stay tuned.
Greetings in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. This is yours truly, Pastor Nell Smith Ward, and I am excited, and I would love to invite you to my that's right, Saturday 30th. What time? 3 p.m. Location, State Street Community Church, downtown Raleigh. The address is South State Street, downtown Raleigh. This is the ticket event. For more information, 919-924-1945. Along with me, our special guest will be Elder Jarrell Smalls. You don't want to miss this grand occasion. This is Pastor Nelson Ford inviting you to my album release party. God bless.
Jesus came and he touched me and he washed my sins away. I'm forgiven. I started shouting, couldn't find no proper doubting. You know that
Partial funding for this program is brought to you by Meemaw's Liquidation. Meemaw's Liquidation is where you can find furniture, home decor, appliances, tools, toys, and much more for less than the actual retail costs. Meemaw's Liquidation, 400 North Green Street, Greenville, 252-364-8121. That's 252-364-8121. Meemaw's Liquidation, open Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m., and Saturday, 10 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. Find what you are looking for at Meemaw's Liquidation. Brand new items at liquidated prices. 252-364-8121. Thank you, Meemaw's Liquidation, for your support.
And we are back here at Awesome Radio, www.wbisawesomeradio.org. I am your host, Richard Taylor, here on the U-Turn Show. Once again, if you haven't been to the website, make sure you go to download all of our apps from Google, Alexa, and also Apple Store. And we're here with my special guest, Michael Brant. He's given us a detail of his life coming up, from New York to going to Benedict College. And I think you were talking about your life in college and how when you went home on break, you started hanging around some of the wrong guys. So how did that affect your mindset, going back to college?
Well, basically, whatever I did in New York, I brought it back to Benedict. So when I graduated high school, and I went back to New York, I was introduced to cocaine. Okay. Right? And when I as a kid, I was a shy kid. I really wasn't that outgoing. And so when I first used cocaine, it turned me into a different person. I became more outgoing. I became more confident in myself. I felt like I was on top of the world, gave me a lot of energy, and so that was something like, okay, this is something I could do. Not really knowing the effects. Nobody ever talked to me about addiction or anything like that. My mother didn't have a clue, so it was just something that I did. But it became like a part of my image, it became part of my image, like I developed this image when I got to school. And so, because that image was in New York, that was the image. Everybody was like, we getting money, we gonna get high, we gonna get clothes, we gonna, that kind of thing. So I brought that image with me to Benedict.
So when you went back to school, you were using cocaine. I know a lot of times it's taboo. So like, did you do it secretly?
Well, it wasn't taboo at that time. At that time, there was a lot of kids in college that was doing cocaine for the first time. And I found that a lot of people was interested in it, and so that's when I decided that I was going to sell it. Right, I could make some money off of this, because everybody in school. Not everybody, but there was a lot of kids in school that wanted to use drugs.
So is that in school when you first started to, indulge in like the criminal lifestyle of being, a quote unquote hustler?
In school, yes. I had flashes of being a hustler before I left to come down south, but yeah, I picked it back up again, and the new thing was cocaine. Okay. It was. I'm gonna sell this. We're gonna make some money. We're gonna get the girls. We're gonna do this. We're gonna party. So all of that just played into the whole image. Because in college, I found that, and this may not be true for everyone, but a lot of people in college, they come to college and they reinvent themselves. If they was a nobody in high school, they became somebody in college. Whether that somebody was real or not. You understand? I was one of those people.
And so you reinvented yourself into Money Mike. I think
I reinvented myself into Money Mike. Yes. So, and I spent the whole lifetime trying to live that image, Money Mike. Right. And Money Mike. That image is what led me into bigger let's say, crimes.
Okay. So, but despite the selling in high school, I mean, in college and using in college, you eventually did graduate. Am I correct?
I graduated. I graduated a semester late, but that was only because I was on probation the first year of college, right?
Okay.
But I did graduate. I graduated, as they say, not summa cum laude, but I graduated lordy, or thank you, Lord.
Yeah, you got out of there.
I graduated. Thank you, Lord. You know what
So
I'm saying?
when you got out, did you stay in South Carolina or did you move back to New York?
Well, I tried to stay in South Carolina, but at the time there was there was a lot of colleges in South Carolina, but the main college was University of South Carolina.
Yes,
right?
USC.
So at the time, a Benedict College degree up against a University of South Carolina degree meant absolutely nothing.
Okay.
So needless to say, all the university kids got the good jobs.
Okay.
Right. So I was not able to secure a job. So I came back to New York, after really just depleting all my resources and trying to, pay my rent and this, that, and the third. And it got to be too hectic. So I came back to New York.
And what did you do when you came back to New York? Like, what was
When
your
I came
return
back
like?
to New York, I got a job working for the federal government. I think I said this before. It was a highly classified job, and a very, very secure job. But it was a very demanding job. It was more like the military, like there was a chain of command. I had to wear a uniform. All of these things was against the image of Money Mike.
Okay.
You
So
understand?
at that time, were you still actively, using cocaine or?
I was still actively using cocaine. I was still actively hanging out. Again, I came back to New York, got with the crowd again, the same crowd that was doing the same thing that they was doing when I left 4 years ago. They were still committing crimes. They were still, using drugs, and all of that again for some reason appealed to me, right? They was anti-police. They was anti-uniform. So the job that I had was a law enforcement job. It was pro uniform, and it fit against the image that I was trying to portray in the streets. So I was not happy there.
Okay. So when did things start to, for lack of a better phrase, spiral out of control for you?
Well, things started to spiral out of control because now I was making my own money. I was still living at my mom's crib, and I had my own bread, and I was trying to still sell cocaine and use cocaine, but eventually all I did was become my own best customer.
Okay.
Right. So needless to say, I started missing work. I started missing work. I was not going to work for like weeks at a time. My mom was just looking at me like, yo, what's up? You all right? Like this, that, and the third. And, she came in my room one night and I was sitting there sniffing cocaine and she caught me.
Ah, man.
Right? With the straw up to my nose and everything. And she almost had a heart attack. I mean, I really crushed her, and so, that in itself made me take a look at myself. I don't think I knew, well, at the time, I thought that I was ready to change because I was tired. I've been missing work. I didn't know whether my job knew or not. Like, it was just a lot of things going on. I was still trying to be with the streets. I had a job. I was still trying to be on the job. It just was not working out. So I went to my job and I told them that I had a problem. This was the first time that I ever admitted that I had a problem, right? I didn't know what they was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. But eventually I went through the EAP and they sent me to a rehab for 28 days.
How did that work when you came out? Rehab is good.
I was good as long as I was in the program.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was good as long as I was in the program. But as soon as I walked out, I don't think it was a day before I got high again.
Okay.
No, all that did was just give me a break from getting high. Gave me an opportunity to figure out what I was going to do next. But when I got off that train and I had some money saved up because my job was still paying me, the first thing I did was I went and I got high.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So your job was still available to you when you got out.
My job was still available to me, but because I got high and I didn't report to work again, I just figured, you know what, this don't make no sense. So I resigned.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just we'll say we're gonna continue this right after this station break from Awesome Radio.
Partial funding for this program is brought to you by The Breakfast Bar, Comfort Food, 605 Albemarle Avenue, Greenville, 252-565-8310. Open Tuesday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Sunday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Closed on Monday. Dine in or take out. No delivery. 252-565-8310. Chicken and waffles, shrimp and grits. The Breakfast Bar is a Southern breakfast and brunch restaurant located at 605 Albemarle Avenue, Greenville, 252-565-8310. Comfort Food. The Breakfast Bar is not just a restaurant. It's a place where family and friends can have a wonderful time while enjoying a multitude of delicious Southern-inspired breakfast and brunch dishes. It's breakfast and brunch for the soul. Comfort Food. Thank you, The Breakfast Bar, for your support.
Greetings in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. This is yours truly, Pastor Nell Smith Ward, and I am excited, and I would love to invite you to my album release party. That's right, Saturday, April 30th. What time? 3 p.m. Location, State Street Community Church, downtown Raleigh. The address is 1200 South State Street, downtown Raleigh. This is a ticketed event. For more information, 919-924-925. Along with me, our special guest will be Elder Jarrell Small. You don't want to miss this grand occasion. This is Pastor Nell Smith Ward inviting you to my album release party. God bless.
Jesus came by and he touched me, and he washed my sins away. I started running, I started shouting, couldn't find no proper doubting. You know that
Yes, and we are back here once again on the YouTube radio show here at awesomeradio.org, 106.9 FM on your radio dial. And we are here with our guest, Mr. Michael J. Brant. Now, we left the story where, you had decided that you wasn't going to go back to work. So
Right.
What happened after that?
Well, I had to get another job. I still was trying to hustle and sell cocaine and work at the same time. Again, like I said, I would make my money back, but I wasn't really getting rich off it. I was just getting high and making my money back. So I still had to work. I got a job working for the city of New York as a caseworker. Right. And I did that for a number of years. But still in all, I progressed into the cocaine usage, and then I started committing more crimes to maintain my addiction. Because now at this point I could call it an addiction. Back then I was still in a lot of denial because I had things. I had a good job, I had a car. So like, no, I wasn't addicted. I had nice clothes, I had jewelry. Still fronting, still living the image of money. You know what I'm saying? So I was one person at work. I was another person in the streets. I was another person to my mom's. I was another person at church. I was something different all the time.
Okay. So eventually your actions landed you to a period of incarceration, right?
My actions led me into A couple of periods of incarceration, yes.
Okay. And what, like, if you can, go into detail, if you don't mind, what was, the reasons
Okay.
and the licks?
So my first felony was a federal felony for cashing a stolen treasury check, right?
Okay.
Because by now I had gotten into the scam business.
Yeah, the scam, what they call the
Right.
scam.
Right. I had gotten into the scam business, and I got into it by accident, right? Because I was selling drugs to somebody. They wrote me a personal check. Right? Now, the person on drugs, why would you take a personal check from them? But I took the personal check anyway. Right?
Yeah.
I put the check in the bank, and the bank gave me the money. Right.
Okay.
But then 3 days later, they called me and told me the check bounced.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, if the check bounced, why y'all give me the money?
Exactly.
So the bank is like, well, it's customary for us to advance you the money, on good faith, knowing that the check will clear. However, the check did not clear. So I said to myself, well, damn, if I put $25 in a $25 check in the bank and it cleared, how about if I put $500 in the bank?
Yeah.
See if it cleared?
How much you can get away with.
Right. So I had 2 bank accounts. Both of them was at zero. Right. So I took a check from one bank account and put it in the other bank account for $500. They cleared the check. I got $500. I'm like, okay, great.
Okay.
Right? So when they called me for the $500, well, your $500 check bounced. I said, okay, no problem. I put in $1,000 check. Right. They cleared me for the 500 and give me another 500. Right.
Yeah.
And then so on and so forth. So that's how I made a living for a very long time. Not to glorify it, but that's what I did.
Some bad checks.
Right. Not to glorify it, And then I started recruiting people off the street to open up bank accounts so we could drop these bounce checks in their accounts.
Okay.
Right? And that's how I made a living for a very long time. I made a living. I made such a good living that I didn't even have to go to work. I worked for the city, so I could take as much time off as I wanted. I was still getting paid from the city, but I was making more money bouncing checks all around town.
Okay.
Now, in the South, they lock your butt up for bouncing checks.
Yeah.
So not in New York.
So with the stolen treasury check, how much time did you get for that?
Well, I got 5 years probation for that.
Okay.
Right. But then while I was on probation, I got arrested for possession of a controlled substance. I got caught with felony weight cocaine in my pocket coming out of drug spot.
Okay.
Right. So
now, was that a setup or just a coincidence?
It wasn't a setup. It was just I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The building was hot. It just was all wrong.
Okay.
The building was hot. We waited too long for the product. The police were circling the block. And when I pulled off I had been there so long that it started getting dark. And when I pulled off from the spot, I didn't have my headlights on in my car.
Okay.
So basically, they pulled me over because my headlights was off, right? And then when they did the search, they found the drugs in my pocket, so they took me to jail. So that drug, I got convicted of attempted possession of a controlled substance and I had to do, because I already had one felony, they sentenced me to 1.5 to 3 years in prison.
Okay.
Right. But while I was going to trial, while I was going through the process of that, I had gotten a new job working for a private.
You was out on bail.
I was out on bail, and I had got a job working for a Fortune 500 company. Now, granted, I've been getting all these good jobs all along, right? But this Fortune 500 company, I was a claims adjuster, right? So the first thing they did was introduce me to what? The checks, right? So they introduced me to the checks, and I my job was to pay insurance claims, right? I would pay claims upwards of $5 million, $7 million, $10 million, but it had to go to the higher. I would process the claim, but if it was over a certain amount, it had to go to the higher ups for final approval.
Yeah.
So I decided that I was going to make phony claims. So I made a phony claim at first for like $75,000, and I cashed the check, and then I did a few more, right? And then I went to somebody.
Your name or somebody else's name?
It was in somebody else's name, never in my name, right? Definitely. So I went to somebody else, and it's like, yo, man, you already stole like $300,000. Might as well steal $1 million. I'm on drugs. I'm getting high. I'm getting money. I'm just like, okay, yeah, that sounded good to me, right? So that's what I did. I recruited some people to give me death certificates. They all had death in their family, so they got the death certificates, and I made up the phony claims, right? And I stole over $1 million in insurance money, right? In the same token, so I had quit my job. I quit my job because naturally I done took the money from them, but I got sentenced for the drug conviction. I was upstate doing my time, right? 2 days before I was to get released, the feds came and picked me up for stealing the $1 million.
They caught up with you.
They caught up with me, right? So, long story short, I went to prison. I was sentenced to, I believe it was 39 or 41 months, something like that, for the money I took. They gave me leadership status, so really nobody else went to jail except for those that had felonies already.
Okay.
And I went to prison, and that's when I decided to write the book. Because I was tired. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I wanted to know what it was that kept me coming to places like this. Right. So go ahead. I'm listening.
Nah, go ahead. So the book is called Diary of a Dead Man. Why did you give it that title?
Well, Diary of a Dead Man is because when I was in jail, I was in prison, I was out of sight, out of mind. All the people that I helped coming up, all the people that I helped get money, even my own family, my ex-wife, my stepkids, nobody was available to me when I was in prison, right? Also, I could not control anything in my life beyond prison, right? My house was getting foreclosed on, right? I couldn't control that. My mother-in-law was sick and dying. I couldn't control that, right? My wife was divorcing me. My ex-wife was divorcing me. I couldn't control that. So I felt like I was dead, right? And another reason, like, I don't know if you ever been in prison or whatever, but when I was in a room full of men, 3-tier bunk beds at some spots, right? And when I woke up in the middle of the night, everybody was asleep. It looked like a morgue. It looked like everybody was dead.
You're right.
It was like I was waking up in the morgue and everybody was dead.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, damn, they dead. I'm dead too.
Definitely.
I must be dead too. So that's where Diary of a Dead Man came from.
Oh, okay. So what did writing the book help you learn about yourself? I'm pretty much telling your story. So, I know you learned a lot about, so what did you learn about yourself?
I learned that drugs wasn't my only problem. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
I learned that I had to go beyond the drug use. I had to go back to the traumas. I had to go back to the negative images. I had to go back to the low self-esteem. I had to go back to wanting to be. I had to go back to trying to live up to an image that I could not maintain for so long. You understand? I had to go back to my thinking, right? My thinking was all wrong. I remember telling my mother that I was going to be a millionaire by the time I was 35, right?
Yeah.
But when I said that out of my mouth, I really had no clue how I was going to be a millionaire, how I was going to become a millionaire. I didn't have a plan, right? When I got out of college, I didn't have a plan, right? Graduating college was my only goal. I didn't plan beyond college. You understand? So when I was in prison, you know, I felt like my 3 felonies nullified everything I did in my life, right? The college degree was just a waste, right? That I needed to start from scratch, you know. And so before I left prison, I made a goal. I made a goal for myself.
Okay.
You know, and I said, in 5 years from now, I'm going to have my master's degree. You know, in 5 years from now, I'm going to be making a 6-figure salary. You know, whether these goals was attainable or not, I still had them.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And so when I got out of prison, you know, by way of the residential drug abuse program, you know, which really helped me to, it was more of a cognitive behavioral program than a drug program. So they worked on your thinking, your stinking thinking, your thinking errors, your criminal behavior, all of that. That's what it worked on. So I knew when I left prison that I was never coming back to prison, even though that's what they were saying. You know, they give you all the statistics. First, you know, if you got a felony, there's 70% chance that you'll return. You know, they give you all these statistics when you're in jail. And I'm sitting there like, not me. I'm not coming back up in this joint, right? Because I got too much going on for me. You know, it finally dawned on me. I think, you know, I did a lot of praying. I did a lot of walking the track. I did a lot of praying. That the prison was on a mountain. It was very picturesque. It showed me all of God's glory. It showed me how he feed the eagles, how he feed the deer, how he feed the muskrat, how he feed the chipmunks, all of that. I watched all of that from my window. I didn't really watch television. I watched nature and how God provides for everything. And I said, God's going to provide for me the same way he provides for these animals out here, because man got dominion over all the animals, right?
So pretty much you had a revelation.
What he's going to do for me, right? And so I did a lot of praying. I did a lot of soul searching, and I really wanted to get my life together. And granted, when I got out of prison, I still had some struggles. You know, but you know, my ex-wife divorced me. You know, she sold the house and ran away with the money. You know, all of that. Took the cars, all that. Wanted to fight me over it, and I was over it. I was like, you know what, you can have all that shit. I don't care. I don't care, because those are just things I can get them back. You know, I got another mission in mind. So I came back home, and I looked for a young lady that I used to work with, because I told her about my hustle. And she was the only person in my life that told me the truth. She told me, yo, you're going to go to jail. And the whole time I was in prison, that's all I could think about. Right? And so I went and I looked her up. Me and her been married 15 years now.
Because I was going to ask you that later on, because I know you're married. So what was that? Was she a stabilizing force?
She was definitely a stabilizing force for me, because she was going through her own thing. I was going through my own thing. You know, I just got out of prison. I just got divorced, you know, and we both prayed and we both leaned on each other and we lifted each other up and we became soulmates and we fell in love and we got married and we have 2 daughters, and you know, and then I got custody of my son because my ex-wife, you know, just was on some other stuff that she sent my son to me. So we all was a family now. You know.
That's
and,
good.
Excuse me, yeah, and you know, so
yes, let me read a couple of comments real quick. Roger Taylor said, thank God for his grace and mercy. You are blessed. Letta Taylor gave you some praying hands. Gwendolyn McCray Pass King says, to God be the glory for the things he has done and continue to do. I love this so much. Touched my very soul. And I guess that's your sister. Yes, God, that's my brother, y'all. So I know Father says all things work together for the good of those that love God. Once again, Mr. Letta Taylor, who's my mother, said a good woman is a great stabilizer. A man that findeth a wife findeth the good thing. So definitely I appreciate y'all for commenting and watching the show. So with that, so you basically went back to school. Did you go back to school like immediately?
No, I worked for a couple of years, you know, working with people with mental illness and substance abuse issues, helping people to, you know, helping to empower people to do better in their lives. That's what I dedicated my life to. So, and then because, you know, in that industry, you can't really move up without credentials. So I decided to go back to school and get my master's degree. So I got my master's degree in 2012, right? And so now I've worked for what they call ACT teams. You know, I've been working with the mentally ill, chemical abuser population for the last 15 years. Now I am an administrator for the state. I oversee 7 programs that are responsible for providing housing for people with substance abuse issues and mental health issues who are homeless, for single adults and for families. So I still have my hand in helping to empower people to do better.
Okay, and you say you used to work directly with the people, you know, on substance abuse. How did you use your experiences to encourage them and to inspire them to change?
Well, you know, I I always have full disclosure. I'm very transparent. You know, I'm always willing to tell my story if it's going to help someone, you know, to get their lives together. You know, I let people know, like, hey man, I got 3 felonies. Then this is for anybody with a criminal background. I got 3 felonies, man. This, you know, but because I put aside the nonsense and I'm honest with myself and I'm honest with the people that I talk to, they give me a chance. When you're honest about what you've been through, people will give you a chance. There are second and third chances, you know, but you got to put in the work. You got to put in the work. First of all, you got to have God in your life.
Definitely,
You don't have to have my God, but you got to have a God. You got to have some God, something higher than yourself that's helping you to get through whatever you get through.
We got about 10 minutes on the radio station, 10 seconds left, but we're going to continue this on Facebook. But thank y'all for joining. This has been the U-Turn Show on Awesome Radio.
Partial funding for this program.
Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So basically, you do so. What point did you realize that God is what you need and you started to develop that relationship?
Well, I realized, like I said, 5 years ago, I realized that I was just tripping myself up, making decisions on my own without the help of God, right? And I just decided that I needed to place my life in the hands of God. Like, I need God to work this for me because I can't do it by myself. Anytime I do something, I put my foot in it. You know what I'm saying? It goes wrong. It goes wrong. So I enlist the help of God in everything that I do, whether it's decisions in my relationship, whether it's work, whether it's you know, my recovery, whether it's, you know, my relationship with other people, finances, whatever. I always pray to God to lead me and direct me. And I don't always know the answer, but he gives me the answer, whether it be through him directly or through somebody else. He sent you into my life through somebody else.
Definitely.
You understand?
Sharice
I
as well.
give all the glory to God, all the glory. Okay. You know, and so that's how I operate now. You know, I don't try to, because I still got things in me that will tell me to write a check. I still got things in me that tell me, oh, you could do a little bit of drugs, or you could drink a little bit of alcohol. You understand? I still
Yeah.
got that in me. So why would I rely on me? You know?
Yeah. So and you mentioned recovery. Like so what type of things that do you do? Because like you said, we all just one bad thought away of
Right.
going back. So what type of things do you do to ensure that those thoughts, don't overtake you?
Well, I keep myself in the company of people that's in recovery. I keep myself around people that are positive, right? That are gonna accept me for who I am and not judge me because I don't drink or I don't smoke or I don't do drugs. You understand? I seek people that are just like me, right? That's positive minded, that have some direction in their life, that know where they want to go and know what they want to do, and that's that. They're not putting up no fronts. They're not living up, with no images. They just being them, living their lives one day at a time.
So now what about those family members or even those friends or those coworkers, the people you may have to deal with that still
Right.
indulge or maybe still on the wrong path. How do you relate or deal with them in that capacity? Like you said, because some people will, judge you for not drinking or judge you for not smoking or,
Right.
judge you for not doing the thing. So how do you deal with them? The people, of course, you don't seek them out, but,
Right.
when you have to deal with those circles, whether it be
Well,
through,
listen, if it's at work, then I keep it professional, right? And I let people know I don't have to go out at the end of the night with you guys to drink and this, that, and I just let them know I don't drink. I don't
yeah,
drink. I don't do drugs. You know what I'm saying? You make the choice. You know what I'm saying? Do you want to hang out with me? But I'm
yeah,
not going to put myself in that position, right? So
mm,
if you want me to go out with you and drink, then the answer is probably no, right?
mm,
If you want me to go out with you and do drugs, then the answer is definitely no, right?
yeah,
Um, and if you judge me, that's okay. It's okay. That means you really don't know me. You really don't know what I'm about. So why would I waste my time with you anyway?
mm.
You
So what
know?
type of things do you do, for fun or recreation or to
Well, I
unwind when
hang out
life?
with my kids. I find like I read. I write. I pray. I exercise. I go to the gym. You know, I hang out with my wife. You
Definitely.
know, and I go out. I go out with her and her friends because they more like on a positive level. They drink. You know what I'm saying? But I don't indulge in drinking, and they accept me for that. You know what
Mm,
I'm saying? Like I don't have to drink, and I don't want to drink. All right.
yeah.
So they accept me and that's what I do. I'm pretty much a loner. I lost some friends when I wrote this book,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. Yeah, I lost some friends because these are some of the same friends that when I was coming up encouraged me to do wrong. You know what I'm saying? They never had the courage to me to say, yo, come on, son. Like, look at what you're doing. Like, yo, you got a college degree. Why are you doing this? They just went along with whatever I was doing because it was beneficial to them. Right. So when I wrote it in the book, even though I changed the names of the characters, they know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So in reading the book, they got a little salty. Right.
So were
I
you
didn't.
ever approached? Like, did they actually call you? Because I know
They
I got a
actually,
couple of
well,
calls
one,
from my
one, of,
book.
one of my friends just stopped talking to me, period. He didn't even call me. One person did call me and said I said something about him that he didn't like, and I apologized to him. And I try to explain to them that I wrote this book when I was in prison, right?
Uh-huh.
And when I was in prison, I was in my feelings about a lot of things that a lot of people did to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my feelings about people taking advantage of me when I had bread, right? But when I was in jail, I couldn't get a nickel from them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, I wrote about you in the book because I was salty. I was mad because I took care of y'all out there in the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now I need something I can't get nothing.
See, a lot of people don't understand though. With you writing that book, though, that's your story too. Like that's your side of the story. I
Right.
had to tell people, say, if you want to tell how you felt about the
Then
situation,
you write a book.
write your own
Right.
book. You know.
Then you write a book.
So
Exactly.
yeah.
So
Are you planning on writing more? You know, I know you said you write. Do you planning on writing another book? Because you said you actually sat on this book for 13 years after
right.
you got out.
Exactly. I have plans to write another book. I have plans to write a few books. I'm thinking about doing children's books, right?
Okay.
I also have the I wouldn't want to call it a sequel, but as you said it, how you said it last week, the change, the what you said was the word you used.
The transformation.
The transformation. I like
Yeah.
that one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Because actually you ended that book, I guess, actually when you were still in prison.
I ended the book. The day I walked out of prison was the last day I wrote in the book.
Okay. So
Right?
yeah, you definitely have to do, a sequel because you got to let people know,
Right.
everything that you read right here is
Right.
just the precursor of what that you're doing now, which is like I said, it's awesome working with the people, that you work with. That's why I asked you so many questions about the program that you do
Right.
because, helping people who are on drugs get housing. I never thought about it as you said, like homelessness is a big factor in using drugs.
It is. It is. Right? Because what else do you have to turn to when you stressed out about living in the streets? If you drink, and you become homeless, naturally your drinking is going to become worse.
Mm-hmm.
If you do drugs and you become homeless, naturally your drug use is going to increase because you are homeless. So in New York, the premise is that if we give these people housing, then they can start to think about how they're going to get off of drugs. How they're going to recover from mental illness. How can we provide them with services that are going to help them to recover, and maintain their housing. So we provide permanent supportive housing. That's what we call it. Permanent supportive housing. So as long as you live there, the services are available to you to help you to excel.
Now, is your mother still alive? And if not, did she live long enough to see the
My mother,
transformation?
thank God, is still alive. She is
Okay.
still a positive influence in my life. Um, she was heartbroken a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing that I will not do for my mother at this stage of my life, and I try to be there for her always. She's slowing down, she's getting up in age, and it's pretty much like now it's my turn to take care of her because she took care of me for so long. Listen, my mother bailed me out of jail. My mother put up her house for me to get out of jail. Nobody did that for me. My mother was the only one there for me. You understand?
So
And she,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and she always prayed for me, and she continues to pray for me and my family now. My mother is my prayer warrior. I have a lot of faith. I wish I had the faith that my mother has.
Yeah, because it's I tell my mother celebrated a birthday earlier this month, and I told her I wouldn't know where I would be without her because if there was one person who always going to stick by your side, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's
There
going to
you
be.
go. There you
So
go. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy
oh yeah,
because she had, my ex-wife telling her, "Don't put up your house for him." No, you know, she had, a lot of people, not a lot of people, but just that one person saying like, no. But my mother, like I said, my mother's a praying woman, and God directed her to do what she had to do, and so, I'm grateful to her, man. I'm grateful to God. I'm grateful, period, man.
in
Like,
retrospect, with with the ex-wife situation, like was she an addiction too, or it was just you and or was
Well,
she a driver?
let's just put it like this. That was part of the attraction,
Okay,
right?
the lifestyle.
Right. Right. So I'm gonna just leave it at that. Like when I wrote the book, I changed her name. I didn't even really put her story out there because it's my story.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Even though she tried to finish me, even though she did everything in her power to kick me while I was down, I still just kind of took the high road
You didn't drag
and
her
went
in
in
the
the
story.
direction. Yeah, I didn't drag her to it because regardless of what, I had to own up to the shit that the stuff that I did.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So
Did you and your mother ever talk about the things that y'all went through? As
my
far as
mother, my mother to this day still will call me and be like, "Are you okay? You sure you're okay? You sound a little funny today. Are you all right?" You sure? I'm like, I'm fine,
for
ma. Are
any
you
sign.
sure? Yeah.
Yeah.
She always,
Yeah.
I guess I have conditioned her to be that way.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know
My
what I'm
mom
saying?
was
Because she always looking to see if I'm going to fall back into the nonsense. You know what I'm saying?
and it's that
And so,
track record. It's that track record.
listen, man, you can't change the past, and I found out in recovery that the longer you stay clean and the more keep excelling, people will loosen up and tend to trust you more. You
Mm-hmm.
understand? And so, my wife trusts me, my mom trusts me, my kids trust me, my son, because he went through all of this with me.
Okay.
Right? He went through all of this with me. He look at me now and can't believe that I'm the person that I am. Right? He
Yeah.
got his own issues because my son was very close to me when I started going to prison. And so he felt he got abandonment issues because of me going to prison and then when I got out of prison, his mom sent him to me. So like she abandoned him, so he got a lot of his own issues
Shuffled
when it
around a
comes
little
to that.
bit.
But when
He
he
was
look at me now, he look at me different. Before, I had to deal with the disrespect, because he was angry, he was resentful. I had to deal with all of that, and once I got myself together, you know, it's been 5 years, now that I've been in recovery. Like he look at me totally different now. Like, yo, man, I can't believe what you're doing. He see me on the radio, he see me do a podcast, he see me write a book, and he's like, whoa, man, like, so he's an aspiring rapper and he's doing videos and stuff like that. So he's seeing me like still striving,
that's
so
good.
so my other kids, my daughters, they looking at me like, yo, man, doing okay, you know.
That's all right, man. That's
Yeah,
that's
man,
that's good.
I'm happy,
So
man. Life is good right now.
yeah. And you
Life
say
is good.
so your mother was in the church. Was she in the church the whole while, like as far as bringing
My
you
mother
up?
never left the church.
Oh,
My mother is in church every day of the week. Right? If she ain't in the physical church, she in the virtual church. If she ain't in the virtual church, she visits. Well, she can't get around like she used to. But she used to go to the hospitals and visit the sick. Go to the nursing homes and visit the sick. She does the sick report at church. She's like on the usher board and all this stuff. My mother been at this one church probably 55 years, man. I'm 58. I can remember as far as I was like 5 years old. Everything go back to 5 years old, but probably before
yeah.
that, So yeah, yeah.
That's good. So what was your faith a part of the conviction? Like because I know I grew up in the church too, and when I was really out there deep in addiction or crime, I would always get convicted, or just, just be like, man, like you said, I gotta stop. I gotta change. So did you ever find yourself dealing with God, praying to God, to take you out of that lifestyle?
Every time I got high and disappeared for days at a time, found myself in some crazy situation. Like I said, I should not even be here, man. Right? I've been in places that you wouldn't even know it was a place. You understand?
Yeah.
So, like, when I find myself in them, God, please don't let me die here. God, please don't let me OD here. God, please don't let me please, God, keep me, save me from this madness, like, all the time. But of course, when it gets you out of the situation, you go back and you do the same thing over and over again. So I just, like I said, when I finally made that decision to turn my will and my life over, that's what I did. Right? So now I don't have to worry about being conflicted. Right? I have a direction. I don't know where God is going to take this book. I don't know where God is going to take me. But all I know is that I'm on God's path. Talking to you, any other podcast, any other radio show, wherever. I don't know where it's going to take me. I don't know where the book is going to go. But I know that God got a plan for me, and I'm just following God's plan.
Yeah, you definitely do, man. I think the book is going to do great things. You're already doing great things, so
Thank you, brother.
That's not an issue. So we're going to go ahead and end the show right now. I know I think we got another show coming on at 10. But is there anything that you want to leave the audience before you go?
I just want to say to the audience, go get the book, right? I could sit here and tell you the stories, but it's a lot of more stories. My journey is a lot more than, this hour radio show. I appreciate the show. No shade to the show. But if you really want to know the down and the dirty, the struggle that I went through, the being flown on prison airplanes to places unknown, being extradited to places unknown, to being in prisons where I almost died. If you want to know that, get the book. You can get the book from me. You can get me on Instagram at moneymjb1. You can call me 347-735-1271. You can reach out to me on Facebook Messenger. However you got to reach out to me, reach out to me. My name is Michael J. Brant on Facebook.
And the book is Diary of a Dead Man.
The name of the book is Diary of a Dead Man by Michael J. Brant. Right? And if you want to know how you can get the book, inbox me on Instagram or inbox me on Facebook or text me at 347-735-1271 and you can get a copy of the book.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Big Kid said, what's the name of the book? So we told her that. She said, her mother's love was priceless. My mother said, Mom was strong. Father said, thank you for an excellent program tonight. Thank y'all for listening. We're probably going to have you back again. Because like I said, an hour doesn't do you justice. But I got the book. So I'm going to dig into it. I'm going to do some promotion, on my website and, on my social media as well. So we'll definitely look forward to reading it. And we definitely going to maybe even do some things. We might have to come up there and do some things.
Listen, I'm Michael Brant, will travel.
Okay.
Right? I will travel. If you need me for anything, my brother, I appreciate you so much. Right? I never forget that you was a part of this journey.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes.
So anything you need from a brother, reach out to me. North Carolina ain't but a hop, skip, and a jump, my man.
Yeah.
Right? Listen, I got people in North Carolina and Charlotte. I got people in Goldsboro. I got people all over North Carolina. I got people in South Carolina. Listen, we can make it happen. Whatever you need from me.
Definitely, man. I thank you so much, and I thank all of our listeners for joining. We're gonna join us next week. Same time, same place at the U-Turn Show. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you for having me, bro.
Thank you.
Peace.
Peace, peace, peace.